Hey, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for Alyssa for that introduction. Before I get into the outline of today's session, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and also really encourage, any kind of participation. If you're free to, raise your hand or on your mics and type in chat, okay? So I am a psychologist in Singapore, and I've trained primarily in the United States, and I've worked in the US, Canada, and Singapore as well. And I'm currently in private practice. This is my 17th year in clinical practice, and I'm still very passionate about what I do and very thankful for it. Women's mental health is such a huge personal topic to me, because one of the very first, I think, roles that I had was working in Singapore's largest maternity hospital, the KK Women's and Children's Hospital. And so I was part of the adolescent medicine team, but also I saw a lot of women with postnatal depression and anxiety. So women's mental health has been kind of like, from the very beginning, a focus of my clinical work. Okay, so for today, we're focusing extensively on women's mental health in the Asian workplace and the unique challenges that come up from working in Asian workplaces and some of the cultural expectations that we have to, struggle with or bear with, as we navigate the workplace. We'll also take a look at what is a microaggression. And we can share, if you're comfortable, I will definitely share my own examples of microaggressions and what a microaggression can feel like, because it can be very confusing to be on the receiving end of a microaggression. Okay. Then we also want to talk about what we can do to advocate for ourselves in the workplaces, and also how we can maybe encourage, advocating for women in the workplace. If you are a male joining us today, I just want to affirm you for joining, and thank you for taking the time to for your interest in this topic, and that you can also be an advocate for women's mental health in the workplace, right? Then we'll take a kind of few minutes for an experiential exercise, hopefully, in order to understand how we can manage stress and build resilience a little bit more in the workplace. Okay, and then we'll have lots of time for Q&A. But you're welcome to just chip in anytime you like during this talk. I would rather have a conversation with you guys and get to know you guys rather than listen to the sound of my voice. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, hello. Okay, great. Okay, before we go on to the material today, we just want to do a quick check-in on how you're feeling today. Please share with us on Mentimeter. I think you can kind of access the QR code or the link right now on the chat. Yep. And just share with us, give us a sense of where you're at today on Tuesday afternoon here in Singapore, 2 p.m. And what's going on for you today. One word or a whole sentence is also okay, just to get a sense of your emotional space. All right. Anybody want to share? Okay. Indifferent. Okay, that's a very descriptive sense. Anybody else? Anybody feeling okay? Yeah. Right. So a variety of emotions coming up, all pretty much really across the spectrum of happy, stressed, anxious, calm, right? Lethargic, excited, really quite a whole range of emotions here today, right? And yeah, every emotion is welcome. And every emotion there's no good or bad emotion, every emotion is welcome. And so you're also welcome to share how you feel about this content or what I'm sharing with you today throughout this brief talk that we're having. Okay, we will have another Mentimeter check-in later on, so thank you guys for participating. Right. So just a brief overview on what is mental health. I think that, post-COVID, there is a huge kind of rush of information, a whole flood of information on social media, right, about mental health. it's been kind of the buzzword in our social media channels. Unfortunately, sorry, I was muted for a while. Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay, yeah. Um, Unfortunately, in this flood of information in social media, there's a lot of misconceptions, I believe, about mental health. On one hand, it's really good that people are interested in mental health, but on the other hand, there's always a sense that, not quite accurate information is being communicated. Largely because also social media is not a great channel for in-depth information. But I think it's important to take into account that mental health is not just psychological, right? Because that's kind of the perception that a lot of people have, that mental health is just about maybe our emotions, our self-esteem, our traits, our temperament, our social skills, our trauma history, etc. But unfortunately, the other two components of mental health are also extremely important. In this diagram, you can see the other two components are, number one, biological. So we talk a lot about neurobiology in mental health, about how your neurobiology affects your mood, your neurochemistry affects your mood, and obviously your genetic vulnerability. If you have a family history of anxiety or depression or schizophrenia, they can all also contribute to your mental health profile, right? And then today we're really talking about the social systems around us, right? The social constructs that actually affect our mental health, because we are not made to exist in isolation. By nature, our very neurobiology demands that we live in community. Now, a lot of people know that, when a baby is born, for instance, the baby's brain isn't fully formed, right? You guys kind of have a sense of that. And a lot of times the mother is kind of advised to hold the baby very close to her chest, it's called skin-to-skin contact. I think if you're a mother here, you probably will know what it is. And this skin-to-skin contact actually produces the chemical oxytocin. And oxytocin is actually called the bonding hormone or the love hormone. And that has neurologically been proven to actually grow the baby's brain. So when we talk about skin-to-skin contact and what benefits it actually creates, we're literally talking about the neurological growth of the baby's brain. And that is how important being with a loving parent is, right? Having a loving parent actually affects our mental health. Likewise, being surrounded by loving friends or family members definitely affect our neurobiology as well and our mood, right? So absolutely, we cannot deny that environmental factors like your peer group, your school structure, your family circumstances, your social-economic status, and the general culture around you. For instance, we navigate here, I think we're all tuning in somewhere from Asia Pacific. So the Asian Pacific culture contributes to our understanding of mental health as well. So we can't really run away from the systems that surround us. Okay, so women are twice as likely to experience depression and anxiety disorders compared to men. As a therapist, I can tell you that I see a lot more women than men, generally because women also are, I think, more open to receive help, right? And they're more cognizant of their emotions, right? And they're more willing to just share what's going on internally versus men. So I believe that whatever statistics that we have about women's mental health are still underreported. The reality is that women do have a higher chance of experiencing mental health issues throughout their lifespan. Okay, and definitely there is a relationship between what we perceive and experience as global inequalities in our systems and our societal constructs that impact our mental health. Next slide, please. Right. Okay. So we're just gonna kind of go in depth about the unique challenges in an Asian workplace. Okay, so for a woman, and you feel free to jump in and contribute, raise your hand or type in chat, right? What has been some of the challenges for you, in an Asian workplace? Obviously, biologically, right, we are already, set up quite differently from our male peers, right? So we all go through monthly menstrual cycles until perimenopause and menopause hits. This is kind of by and large what women have to biologically struggle with. And if you have any diagnosis of PCOS, for instance, your menstrual cycles or hormonal disruptions will be higher than the average, okay? And then if you go through, if you choose to have a child, you have a child, there will be then pregnancy, childbirth, and then transiting, right? A lot of people that transition pre-motherhood and then post-motherhood back to the workplace. There's a whole psychological challenge altogether about juggling these various responsibilities. However, in many Asian workspaces, these challenges are not really talked about. They're not really discussed, right, openly, maybe versus more Western workplaces. So if a woman comes back from an extended maternity leave, I'm not sure if she's being checked on, like how are you doing physically, right? How are you doing mentally, emotionally? I'm not sure if she's being given the support that she needs in that transition back to the workplace. Okay, now psychological. I have a lot to say on this. So yes. So thank you for the contribution. Yes, absolutely. So there is a taboo about talking about menstruation. Hopefully, I think in Asia, hopefully we're chipping away at these stigmas and taboos, right? Because I mean, every woman has to go through it, right? Okay. So psychologically, what I've noticed treating women for the last 17 years is that, we have a tendency to internalize our emotions, right? When something bad happens in the workplace, let's say you made a mistake, and I've made a mistake before. Everybody has made a mistake, right? The first tendency is to go inside and blame ourselves. The first tendency is to say, oh my gosh, I screwed up. Why did I do this? What's wrong with me? How can I do better? It's on me, right? So the first instinct of most women is to internalize blame, and then really get into almost like an anxiety spiral about what's going to happen next. Oh no, my boss is going to get mad at me. Oh no, my colleague's going to hate me. I spent so many years building up this reputation, this kind of image, or I've come so far, and now this one mistake is going to bring me down. So these are some of the maladaptive kind of thoughts that a lot of women do have, and this is what I would say a signal of a very strong internal critic. Okay, who here has seen the movie Inside Out? Y'all can like I saw, yes, yes, you saw Inside Out. Okay, so Inside Out 2 was just released, right? Okay, and Inside Out 1 was released like maybe 6 years ago. And in my opinion, just my personal opinion, Inside Out 1 was done a little bit better. But Inside Out 2 is also very interesting because the protagonist goes through adolescence, right? It's all about her parts coming out, her emotions coming out during puberty. And so what I really noticed in a lot of women is the presence of a part called the self-critic. Now, you've probably heard this word, right? Maybe if you've attended therapy or workshops or even your own personal therapy, you might have struggled with a strong internal self-critic, okay? And I would say for a lot of Asian women, we have a strong internal self-critic. Okay, I've not met an Asian woman that doesn't have a self-critic at this point in my career, myself included, right? And this self-critic can really generate a lot of anxiety and negativity in our heads, blaming ourselves for mistakes and really bringing us down and making us feel quite defeated, okay? So this is one kind of maladaptive, not so healthy coping style. It is still a coping style, because just like we learn in Inside Out, every emotion has a function. If you guys saw that movie, every emotion has a role to play. So the self-critic actually is trying to help us improve, right? If you think of the role of the self-critic, the role of the self-critic is to motivate us and to help us improve. However, when the self-critic is too loud and too dominant and too extreme, that's when problems start happening to us internally, right? Okay, next slide, please. All right, social, right? As I mentioned just now, we really have to look at the social environment that we're all operating in, right? Because we are not made to exist in isolation. We are all impacted by the dynamics in our family, in our workplaces, in our friend groups. Okay. Now, the problem with the expectation, the cultural expectation of women in Asia is that we are, unfortunately, in most of our Asian cultures, expected to be the caregiver, right? So if you are, okay, I'm not sure who else here is the eldest child in your family. I am, right? Okay. So eldest female children have known statistically to take on a lot of caregiving responsibilities. You are kind of like the default, okay? And then we replicate this caregiving responsibilities or roles in our adult lives. So, and yes, hi, and yes, even the youngest, let's say, if you're not the oldest, let's say if you've had an elder sibling who was sick, right? Or who had a mental or, emotional or physical health issue, then the middle and the youngest would then take on those caregiving roles. Yeah. So now, if you're an Asian female listening to this, I think caregiving is so much expected of us. Absolutely. We can be the caregiver, not only, I'm not talking about traditional caregiving roles for children, but also for our parents, right? And if you are in the sandwich generation, I'm not sure how many of you guys have young children and aging parents, then you're considered the sandwich, right? You're kind of squeezed on both sides. You're caregiving on both ends. And what happens to prolonged caregiving? If you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not having active self-care, the probability is that you will then feel emotionally burnt out. Okay, so this is a whole different talk altogether. I can talk on and on about caregiving burnout. It's a huge topic. It's almost a worldwide epidemic after COVID, right? If you have an aging parent, you have a sick parent, sick relative, if your spouse has a mental illness, then you are the caregiver. Okay, and if you are expected to provide caregiving and earn money at the same time, that's what's happening to a lot of Asian women. You are literally burning the candle on both sides, right? This is a huge topic of consideration, I believe, specifically in South Korea. There's a huge article on that because a lot of South Korean women are refusing to get married and have children because of the strong cultural stereotypes, right? That women are expected to still do the majority of caregiving in the house, even though they earn as much as men. Okay, so then we have the second point, which is under-recognized and underpaid, situations or struggles that Asian women face that we do not, get equal recognition, right, or equal remuneration than men. Now, I'm tuning in from Singapore, and I just looked at the recent income disparity rates. So in May, I believe the article is May 2024 this year, and the income disparity has dropped, but is still significant. In Singapore, the income disparity is now 14.3%, right, between men and women. So men still earn about 14.3%, and I believe this number is higher in other Asian countries. So you in your Asian country, it could be 16, 18, 20 something percent lower than men. Okay. So there is this almost like this negative cycle going on, right? Because women are not being remunerated as equally, right? And then because we're not remunerated equally, we're not given the same opportunities, we're not given the same status, then it creates a negative cycle because then we have less exposure, less opportunities to shine, less women are in leadership positions. In the same article, they talked about how many women are there in the top 100 companies in Singapore, the 100 companies listed in the SGX Stock Exchange. And only 25% of the leadership roles are female. So pretty much about 75% of these top 100 companies are led by men. So there is a huge disparity here. All right. Next slide, please. And thank you so much for contributing on the comments. If I will refer back to them if I don't have time, but please continue these conversations. I think that I do have an eye on it, and our facilitators also have an eye on that. Please let us know what you think. Okay, we're gonna step quickly into microaggressions right now. So this report says that more than 4 women report experiencing harassment and or microaggressions. Now, let me take a pause here to kind of differentiate what is outright workplace harassment and microaggressions, because sometimes people are a bit confused. Okay, so obviously experiencing outright, for instance, any kind of physical or sexual harassment is kind of like in your face, pretty obvious, right? It's abuse. Okay, it's a crossing of the boundary. It's illegal. In most countries, it's illegal, and it's a crime. Okay, microaggressions, however, is a little bit sneaky, right? Because they are not explicit, they are implicit, they are implied. Okay, so it's pretty hard to catch on microaggressions because they are not like in your face. Okay, they're not like, oh yeah, somebody called you a name, somebody yelled at you and called you a name. That is outright verbal abuse. Microaggressions are very subtle. And sometimes when microaggressions happen, you can be like, did that just happen to me? You kind of second guess yourself and be like, that didn't feel right, but I don't know what didn't feel right. And then you might go away with kind of like almost like anxiety in your stomach and a bit like, oh yeah, you maybe can't sleep well that night. And then you go through the situation over and over again. You're like, okay, that didn't sit well with me, but I know, my boundaries were crossed. There was some disrespect there, but I can't put a finger on it. Probably a microaggression. Okay, so if you are a victim of microaggression in terms of a man, kind of obviously the word mansplaining, I'm sure you guys have heard of it, mansplaining to you. Yes, I get that all the time still. So, and yes, and on men kind of cutting you off if you're mid-sentence, yeah, or assuming that you have nothing to say. All right, don't know if any of you have ever been in a workplace situation, and they ask, what, does anybody have anything to say? And they kind of skip over the women, or they don't actually let the women speak, and then they go straight to the men, or they just continue on their agenda. That is a subtle microaggression. Okay. And microaggressions over time, if it happens frequently enough in your workplace, will definitely affect your self-esteem, and then will affect your engagement in work. You will feel less and less seen as an individual, and that could definitely affect your workplace satisfaction and productivity, and lead to, feelings of alienation. You might feel like, oh, I don't want to come to work. I don't want to be in this environment anymore, but I don't quite know why. So if you are experiencing any microaggressions right now, I encourage you to really, spend some time really just, validating your own emotions and getting the support you need, whether it's from your friends or your colleagues, or to see a mental health professional. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've got some concrete examples here in case you guys are still wondering what a microaggression is. So the use of sexist language, right? That's pretty obvious. Even though it sounds nice, it's still sexist, okay? Because you don't get men talking like that to other men, all right? Then there are invalidations. For instance, dismissive language, like you are just being sensitive. You are overthinking. So when the other person is not taking responsibility for the impact they have on you, and then redirecting that blame on you and invalidating you, okay? Assumptions of inferiority, being complimented for exceeding low expectations, right? Not really looking at you or regarding you as a peer and an equal, okay? And being mansplained too, which unfortunately still happens to a lot of women. And nonverbal, so a lot of nonverbal microaggressions do also take place. So if you are maybe, are more vocal or more assertive, then people might feel that you are bossy when you're just being, a strong leader. Okay. And let me just really qualify what I'm saying. Microaggressions can also happen woman to woman. Okay. I also have to put it out there. It's not just men communicating like this, but women can also put women down. And that is unfortunately in some workplaces, right? Some strong female leaders might be seen as too much, okay, by other women. Yeah. Invasion of space, unnecessary touching. You guys, I'm sure, I don't need to explain this, when somebody is in your space, cross your boundaries, but did not apologize. Okay. Benevolent sexism being unnecessarily taken care of by male coworkers. This is kind of similar to the assumptions of inferiority, right? Like, oh, you are so fragile, let me take care of you, right? So that kind of like paternalistic regard. And then, like I said, being interrupted when speaking. All right. Feel free to kind of add on to this on the chat, or, contribute, raise your hand, etc., about nonverbal or verbal microaggressions. I think we have a comment here about comments on weight, and definitely comments on weight are not, I would say, respectful at all, and should be not communicated in that workplace, right? So that's definitely a boundary violation. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, yes. Yes, please share with us right now. And the second Mentimeter, it's going to come up now. Have you experienced gendered microaggressions at work, right? Microaggressions specifically because you are a female, okay? Whether it's verbal or non-verbal. Have you ever felt shut down, discriminated against, ignored, silenced, invalidated, looked down on in any way because you're a female? And how did you feel when that happened to you? How did that impact your mood or your performance or your general like well-being? Oh, thanks for the share. Yeah. So sometimes we can also invalidate others, right? But maybe that invalidation is just, I'm not sure if that's based on gender, right? But thank you for sharing. We can also invalidate others unknowingly, unintentionally, for sure, because we're human. So, okay, so the poll results, 60% of you have experienced gendered microaggression at work, and 40% have not. So quite a majority have. And, like I said, microaggressions sometimes are quite invisible, and sometimes we're not sure whether it's a microaggression, right? Yeah. Okay. Right. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so let's talk about how, what kind of changes do you feel could help you personally in your workplace, right? I think that right now, obviously, a lot of the workplace is, at least 50%, right, of the workplace filled with women. So it makes business sense, right, for companies to talk about the well-being of women in the workplace, right? It's something that a lot of companies are now talking about because they know that if women are respected, they will be more engaged, more productive, and you will then have loyalty to your employee. Employer. So as employees, this is a chance to kind of let us know, what do you want to see in your workplace? I have had the opportunity to talk at several workplaces myself, from small startups to larger companies and then huge tech companies. And I think that there is a recognition that, that women have specific needs, and women's needs need to be talked about separate from men's needs, right? So number one is top of the list. I think a lot of workplaces are kind of going with flexible work arrangements. I know a lot of us now work from home half the week. I'm not sure who else is tuning in from home. And these flexible work arrangements are just much better for a lot of parents. I think a lot of mothers do appreciate that. But the downside of flexible work arrangements, I know this because a lot of people do tell me, is that then there is a lack of boundaries, right, when you work from home. So sometimes when you work from home, it could be that you feel like you are working a lot more because you are always constantly on your computer and you don't shut down at a reasonable time. There's no such thing as office hours because you can always be contacted. So when you're working from home, it's so important then to have good and healthy boundaries with yourself, right? So that work from home can actually be a good thing. Okay. All right. Okay. And so then there is also the other policy of paid leave related to menstrual symptoms that, now that the menstrual cycle is hopefully being normalized more and more in the Asian workplace, but also that if you have severe kind of symptoms during your menstrual cycle, we call it kind of a hormonal disorder, that is itself a medical condition, and that you can get paid leave for that. Okay. Now, then there are a lot of also employers educating employees on microaggressions and managing unconscious bias. And then there's also a lot of like policy around inclusive language, right? I'm sure maybe if you have a DEI department, that's their prerogative, right? To make sure that no one is discriminated based on gender, race, or sexual orientation. Okay. All right. So now, okay. So how would you like your workplace to support you? Would you like to share with us today? How would you feel more included and supported in your workplace? I know there's a discussion now on chat that workplaces are very toxic. And I do believe that workplaces have the potential to be unhealthy because workplaces are made, are filled with flawed human beings. That's what a workplace is. Any community, any group of people is a flawed community. So we must bear in mind that what a workplace is just a group of flawed people. And when we put flawed people together, there will always be mistakes, right? Because that is human nature. So I'm glad there is a conversation about how workplaces can be so unhealthy and toxic. But maybe we can turn the conversation into how then can we improve our workplaces, And these are some of the great suggestions coming up here. Yes, supportive supervisors, super important, right? I believe it was like a Harvard Business Review survey many years ago about the top 3 reasons why people leave their jobs. Okay. And I'm not sure if you guys probably already know this, but most people do not leave their jobs because of their salary. Okay. Most people, the number one reason why people leave their jobs is, I think you guys can guess, right? A negative, unhealthy relationship with your boss or your team. That is the number one reason why people leave. So it is so important to get the support from your leadership, from your direct report, from your team, for your peers. That is super important for you. Yes. So this is such great suggestions coming out. I really love the acknowledge anger is also an emotion for men and women. When men get angry, yeah, exactly. When men get angry, it is normal, right? When women get angry, we get the microaggression, we get the stereotype. We are told to silence, right? So if, again, referencing Inside Out, that angry character with the fire coming out of his head. Guess what? Women have that also, and that's fine. That is normal, right? So especially in Asian workplaces, women are not allowed to have strong emotions, strong negative emotions. Why? It's such a cultural expectation that women are quiet, cooperative, I don't know, but other words, engage, easygoing, pleasant, kind, right? So the Asian woman is really shouldering a lot of these gender and cultural stereotypes. I love that the suggestions keep coming. Absolutely. Stop making women the default note takers, event organizers. Yes. So we are tired of doing the administrative tasks, for sure. Yes. Women are so much more talented than that, right? We have so much more skills. Absolutely. Can we scroll up? Sorry, Kai, do you think I scroll up? I missed some of that up. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Everyone gets access to therapy. I think that's excellent. A lot of international companies now are giving mental health services to their employees. Have a peer system. I think that's also an excellent suggestion, and I think that is why I think Calm Collective, right, has calm circles in order to access the support from your peers. You don't, accessing a mental health professional is great, but if you don't have access to that, having a peer support system is extremely important and can be so beneficial for your mental health. Okay, thank you so much, guys, for all these suggestions. Yeah, I just want to also just take a shout out to the recognition that female bosses can also be the ones perpetuating microaggressions and toxic environments for sure. And that's why, I think that microaggressions can be, it's not just, like I said earlier, not only men to women, but women to women, men to men, right? So we ourselves hold our female colleagues to certain stereotypes in boxes. We put women in boxes also, right? And why is this so? It's because sometimes we put ourselves in boxes, right? Have you ever heard of I think this is a quote, but I'm not sure of the source, that we can only treat others as well as we treat ourselves, okay? So if you have, if you're angry inside and you're constantly criticizing yourself inside, you probably can't really treat others very well because you're so stressed inside. There's so much internal conflict, that you're not able to be compassionate and kind to other people. So if you want to be compassionate to others, the very most important step is to be compassionate to yourself first, always, right? Just like, that advice, getting on the plane, put the mask on yourself first before putting it on the child, right? Same thing with mental health. Take care of yourself first. Make sure you feel enough air, make sure you're alive and you're well before taking care of someone else. This is always the default advice, okay? So let's get into the last segment here of this talk before we open the floor to Q&A, which is how do we manage stress and build resilience in our workplaces? So managing stress and building resilience for me is a whole other talk, okay? But we're just gonna look specifically now a little bit on some stress management techniques and self-care practices that you can actually use in your workplace and your daily lives, okay? Now, the first stress management technique here is what we broadly have called mindfulness. And I'm sure that a lot of you have heard of the word mindfulness somewhere, right? Okay, so what is mindfulness? Again, when there's a proliferation of mental health information, sometimes there is misinformation. And it is, I'm very passionate about not being misinformed, okay? Because mental health is something that we should take seriously and we should not perpetuate misinformation. So mindfulness is not about blanking out your mind. It is also not about zoning out. And it is definitely not about being calm all the time because no one can be calm all the time. Okay. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness meditation, the strict definition, is to be present without judgment. So let me cover the two concepts one by one. So being present means being right now, right here, in this present moment. So this present moment is specifically 16 July, 2:44 p.m. in your physical space, okay? Your mind is present, which means your mind is not thinking about what am I going to do later or worrying about what I'm going to eat tonight or what chores I have to complete tomorrow or what will I be in 10 years' time. It is also not in the past. Oh, I shouldn't have said that yesterday to my boss. Oh, I shouldn't have texted that to my friend. So it is very difficult just to be present, not in the past and not in the future. A lot of us, the moment we get out of bed, we're already in the past and the future. We're already thinking, I shouldn't have done that yesterday. We're already worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow. Very few of us are actually in the present, okay? So mindfulness is about being present, and the second concept is to be without judgment. So which means that you're not being present, but judging everyone else and judging yourself. That is not mindfulness, okay? You can be present, but you'll be like, oh, this talk sucks. This is silly. Everyone here is not contributing. That's a judgment, right? Or you're judging yourself. Oh, I'm not performing today. I'm not my usual self. What's wrong with me? That's a self-criticism. That's a judgment. You're very present, but you're judging yourself. Okay. So mindfulness is really about being present without judgment. And these are the 3 steps of mindfulness that we do encourage. And again, just a caveat here that mindfulness cannot be explained in 15 minutes. So if you guys are really curious, I suggest that you do your own research and reach out to specific mindfulness meditation resources. Could be on YouTube or an app or some books to help you along this journey. However, the first very step of mindfulness is to observe what's happening inside of you. So instead of making a judgment on yourself, the first step is to stay in observation, is to say, okay, I'm tired. That's an observation. Okay, I'm hungry. That's an observation. Okay, I have a desire to go to bed. That's an observation. Okay, and then you describe the observation and you then really lean into what that observation is trying to tell you about your needs in this present moment. We're not here to make judgment. We're here to really understand what you need. Okay, so if you sense a tiredness in you, I think there was a tired word in the Mentimeter just now, right? If any one of you is tired, just really listen to the tiredness and see what that tiredness is trying to tell you. Maybe you do need more rest. Maybe you do need to take a walk. Maybe you need to write in your journal or meditate. So really understand your needs instead of judging them. So that is a stress management technique that is invisible. Now, a lot of stress management techniques that are useful are not visible. I must say that. They are not Instagrammable, okay? Self-care, real consistent self-care is not glamorous and you cannot put it on Instagram. A lot of it is invisible. Is how you talk to yourself every day, is your inner dialogue, and it's a continuous commitment to your mental health. All right. Now, the next stress management technique is emotional regulation. Now, we have a lot of things there, 4 points. We don't have time to really go through everything. But, the parts model is, I'll just talk briefly about the parts, and then we'll go straight to complete the stress cycle. Can we go back? Yeah. Okay, so parts model is really an informal name for the model of therapy that I do use. And if you've seen Inside Out again, I reference it because it's actually based on this model of therapy called the parts model. The formal name of this model is called internal family systems. And the idea of this model of therapy is that we all have these parts that exist in us. We all have these emotions, just like in the movie. And all of them play a role in helping us function, in helping us survive. Okay, so if you guys saw the movie, you might have seen anxiety, right? She was like spinning in a tornado. She was getting really like super anxious and she was doing things on autopilot and she was creating so much stress. And there was also a scene where she was using the protagonist's imagination to draw and talk about all the worst case scenario. Now, that is the function of anxiety, right? Anxiety thinks of the worst case scenario. It's literally worst case scenario planning. And then when anxiety could speak in that movie, she said, well, I'm just trying to help, right? She was actually saying the role of anxiety is to help. So if you think of that neurobiologically, that also fits in with neurobiological theory. Anxiety sits in the part of the brain that generates fear, same part of the brain. And fear is a protective emotion. Fear exists to protect you from harm. That is the biological function of fear. Okay? When fear kicks in, just like a lion looking at a deer, National Geographic documentary, a lion looking at a deer, the deer looking at the lion, sorry, the deer looking at the lion, looking at him, and he realized, oh no, there's a lion. The deer goes into fight or flight, right? Fear kicks in, and that creates that, adrenaline and cortisol that allows the deer to run away from the lion. That is the function of fear. So remember that every emotion has a function, including the negative ones. Okay? Even the negative ones are trying to contribute in some way. Now, I will talk about coping ahead and sleep hygiene first. So coping ahead meaning is a good way of kind of preempting your needs, right? It's about saying, well, okay, if I know I have a stressful day tomorrow, what can I do today to help regulate my nervous system? What can I do today to nourish myself? That's what coping ahead really is. However, coping ahead requires that you actually know your emotional needs, okay? That you actually have some level of self-awareness that you're stressed. You can't really cope ahead without self-awareness, okay? So people who have a sense of their emotional capacity then can cope ahead. They can plan accordingly. Sleep hygiene is super, super important for stress. Now, I cannot say enough about sleep. Sleep itself is a whole topic, a whole science. If you guys would like to know about sleep, I think obviously if you guys have heard of Andrew Huberman and at Huberman Lab, he has a whole podcast on sleep and how sleep is the cornerstone of health. Without sleep, our brains go out of whack, our moods go haywire, and because sleep is a regenerative process that no human can go without. Okay, so none of us, no matter how fit or young we are, can go without sleep for very long. And it is actually important for your brain to sleep. Okay, so please take care of yourselves. We do have an insomnia epidemic as well worldwide. Okay, a lot of people can't sleep. So if you are having less than 7 hours of sleep a night, I would say that would be concerning. Okay, less than 7 hours of sleep regularly is concerning. That is not recommended. And adults should get around 7 hours of sleep. Okay, now let's go to complete the stress cycle. We can go to the next slide now. Okay, so completing the stress cycle really means is that when you're stressed, when you have a strong emotion, right? Anxiety, fear, nervousness, what we want to do, or what we actually recommend, is that you do not cut the emotion off prematurely. A lot of us, when we feel stressed, what we do is that we distract ourselves. We go on YouTube, we doom scroll on Instagram, we go on Shopee and buy 5 things that we don't need, right? I don't know what else, Lazada. We distract ourselves. We have so many things in our society right now to distract ourselves, right? Okay, there are whole industries that are built on distraction, that we don't allow ourselves to complete the stress cycle. Okay, if you complete the stress cycle, you feel that your stress will automatically decrease. Okay, so you guys know the bell curve, right? It's like a wave, like, okay, you'll go up and then there's a peak and then it will go down, right? So emotions are existing on a bell curve. They have a peak and then they have a fall. Okay, so emotions actually don't last very long. In the last scientific study, emotions last about less than 30 seconds. Okay, if you really concentrate on the emotion, not the thought. Okay, the thought lasts longer. Our spiraling thoughts last very long. Emotions don't last very long. Okay, so emotions, what happens is that a lot of us, when let's say our stress is going up this bell curve and it's closer to the peak, and then we just cut it off. We go Shopee, we go Lazada, we go and drink a glass of wine, whatever your escape choice is, we go and yell at our children, whatever. So we cut the emotion off, right? By distracting ourselves, by numbing ourselves, or we criticize ourselves. Remember the self-critic I mentioned earlier in the talk? We judge ourselves for our emotions. Why am I anxious? What's wrong with me? I need to fix it. So instead of letting the emotion complete, which is letting it peak and fall, we're always constantly, prematurely cutting it off, and it never completes. And what happens when an emotion never completes? It comes back. It comes back. Because the cycle hasn't been completed. Okay, so that's why mindfulness is super important, very helpful for a lot of people, because mindfulness helps us complete our stress cycle. Okay. But if you don't like mindfulness, a lot of my clients sometimes say, mindfulness is not for me, and that's fine. Mindfulness is not for everybody. And these are some of the examples we have here to complete your stress cycle. Okay. So you could go for a walk, right? Physical activity is always good to discharge some of the stress. You could laugh. Laughing is very cathartic, right? You could cry. Crying is normal, yes, healthy, right? Letting yourself be sad, okay? Or you could express yourself through journaling, art, sketching, knitting, any kind of art form, right? Or you could call a friend, a social interaction to talk about your emotion, process your emotion. Okay, so these are some of the examples that we have for you to complete this cycle instead of really just cutting off yourself from your emotion. And then you see that 2 hours later it comes back, or tomorrow it comes back, because you know if distraction and escape has worked for human beings, no psychologist would have a job, myself included. Okay, so it hasn't worked for human beings for many years. Human beings have tried to cut themselves off from their emotions for hundreds of years. Unfortunately, that hasn't been very helpful or sustainable for most of us. Okay, so we are getting to the end of the talk now. I think, are we on the last slide? Okay, okay. All right. So before we close and open the floor to any questions, I think we only have less than 5 minutes. We wonder if you guys could take a moment to participate in our last Mentimeter, which is, what advice would you give to a younger woman, or if you are a male, your younger self, who is starting your career in terms of maintaining mental health? What do you wish you knew earlier on in your career? If you have a younger sister or a cousin starting work, what would you tell her? You take a moment to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Your feelings are valid. There is no wrong or right emotion. Don't keep it to yourself. Absolutely. Share with your friends. Yeah, I love these suggestions. Yes, you did your best. This too shall pass. When we're in a crisis, we always feel that it's never going to be over, right? But it will pass. You are not alone. Yeah, I absolutely love the one that says it's okay to say no to things. Absolutely. Yes, we have all started out at the bottom. We've all been juniors, and we all thought that we had to say yes to everything, right? We were so, I think so embarrassed, so feeling so small, didn't set our boundaries, our rights, and a lot of us got burnt out by that. Yeah, seek help, stand up for yourself and your feelings. Yeah, absolutely. Set boundaries. Yes. And then we have, I love, yes, insufficient sleep is not a badge of honor. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. We are not in a competition of who can last the longest without sleep or food or exercise. Yeah. So we are here to create sustainable habits that are good for our mental and physical health so that we can run this race, right? Okay. Because work is a marathon, life is a marathon, and we want to be able to have sustainable habits so that we are not waking up every morning feeling terrible, right? That is not a sustainable way to live. Yeah. And that a good night's rest, absolutely, a good night's rest sometimes can be much better than even therapy. Okay, so we now have maybe 2 minutes for any questions for me, and you can type it in chat, or you can raise your hand and speak if you like. Or if any questions, come to you, I guess you can always DM the team on Instagram. Okay, any questions at this point? Anyone at all? Thank you so much for being here. And I think, like Alyssa said, there's circles, right, Kai, coming up on body image pretty soon. And I appreciate you guys taking the time today to really learn more about women's mental health. And oh, there's a question. What would your advice be for your younger self? Oh, lovely question. Thank you for asking, Michelle. For me, I think, I didn't share with you guys. So psychology is my second career. I was actually a brand strategist at an advertising firm, working very long hours. And at the time, in the first kind of part of my career, like every junior staff, we are so eager to prove ourselves. We're so eager to make sure that people form a good impression of ourselves. We work hard and we work very beyond what is expected. And so I think I would like to say to my younger self that you are worthy. You are worthy no matter how you perform today, whether it's a good day or a bad day. Your worthiness does not depend on your performance. That is what I would like to say to you. Okay, so I think there's a request to share slides. Kai, is that possible? I'm not sure. Yes. Where do you think a person can go to when facing problems at work? Because HR is not the best place to go. Thank you for that question, LB. Well, I think first of all, we talk about peer groups. If you feel that your manager is not safe for you, not supportive, HR is, not a good place for you, not supportive for you, I would say first, I hope that you have a good peer group. If your company has any mental health resources like an EAP service, Employee Assistance Program service, then please turn to that. And also, I feel that family and friends do play a huge part if your workplace isn't safe as your support system. And then, of course, reach out to a professional mental health services in your community or your city if you need to. But please don't keep it to yourself. Okay, please reach out for help. Okay, unfortunately, we do have to close now. Kai, I'm going to leave it to you to let them know about the slides. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Jolene, for your sharing today. I think it was very insightful. It's a very important topic that we often don't connect to like mental health. And thank you for teaching us like the really good and useful like practical tips that we can use to manage our own mental health on our own. Yep. So if the participants have any other thoughts they want to share with us, you can scan the QR code, or I think Pav also sent a link down in the chat. And as Jolene mentioned, we are having a Calm Circles coming the next Wednesday on body image, but we also do it like twice monthly. So we do have a lot of other topics coming up. The one next Wednesday is on body image, but if you have any suggestion about anything you want to talk about, you can always reach out to us as well. Yes. And yes, do share your feedback. And yeah, thank you, Jolene, for helping us out today and sharing with us your thoughts on this topic.